This is the dirtiest fairy tale I've ever read. It's also very disturbing. Before Disney and others sanitized stories with a PG, true love's kiss, fairy tales could be really raunchy. This one's also one of the most brutal, which is saying a lot because I've covered a lot of old dark stories. There are a lot of weird royal kinks involving demons and shrubs, and there's also gruesome stuff that would feel more at home in a crime scene. So do consider this a heads up on both counts. This is all hot and heavy, fun and filthy, with dastardly disturbing details and murmurous madames. So join me if you dare. Once upon a creepy time, there were, as always, a well-off man and woman who had everything except for a child, and they desperately wanted one, so much so that the wife constantly prayed, "If only I could bring something into this world, I wouldn't care if it were a branch of myrtle." Mind you, do be careful what you wish for. She says this so often, and it bothers the heavens so much that they do make her pregnant. And 9 months later, she gives birth, not to a bouncing baby, but to a sprig of myrtle. And I don't know if birthing a sharp, pokey twig tree would be more or less painful than birthing a 10-pound turkey of a human being, but either way sounds painful enough. Thank you very much. Now, we've covered myrtle before in another folklore video, but to recap, as it's extremely relevant to this story, myrtle is a beautiful flowering plant often associated with the goddess Venus as she rose out of the sea holding a sprig of it. It's symbolic for love and poetry and is sacred because of its, quote, ability to die and be reborn. A sure sign that this is going to be brutal. Because of its revivifying lore, it's used as decoration in cemeteries and in funeral wreaths. And all of this is important, but for now, know that the new mother is just so proud of her baby myrtle. She plants it in a pot decorated with grotesques, which are similar to gargoyles, but a little different. These sometimes faces, sometimes animals, are said to protect the building onto which they are carved, or in this case, the pot containing the baby myrtle. Mom displays it proudly in the windowsill and delights in pruning and cooing over her plant child day and night. And I'm not sure for how long or how old this myrtle tree is, because unfortunately that's relevant. Yay, happily ever after. Because one day the king's son, of course, passes by en route to a hunt. And now we get freaky because, quote, he became so infatuated beyond all measure with the lovely branch of myrtle that he would pay an eye for it. Weird currency, but wow, fairy tale royalty sure are notorious for odd predilections. This one's infatuated with a tree, but Sleeping Beauty Italia's, lover, air quotes, an old man king, loved, Reed took advantage of a random teenager he found in an abandoned mansion who he thought was dead, or at the very least incapacitated beyond protesting. For deets on that sick tale, click here. And Snow White was a literal dead girl too. In some versions, her prince is shocked, I mean shocked, when she actually wakes up. He was all for bringing her home stiff as a board. But pining after a tree? That was not a pretty mythological nymph prior to the transformation? That's a new one for sure. I am unsure how one becomes lusty for a shrub, and this seems excessive, but just wait, because Mom will not part with her plant baby. So the prince threatens her, and then bribes her more and more, and finally, quote, after 1,000 no's, yikes, she agrees, so long as he holds it dear to his heart, since she loved it, quote, more than a daughter and valued it as much as if it had come from her own loins. Which, I mean, technically it did. Smitten, the prince takes this potted plant to his bedroom and, quote, hoes and waters it with his own hands. What did you think was gonna happen? Oh, that? Huh, strap in. One evening, after the prince blows out the candles and is all snug in his bed, he hears footsteps somewhere in the house. Then, quote, something groping its way towards his bed. He thinks it's either a thief or a house imp, logical. But this guy is brave, so pretends to be dead to see how this all goes down, quote. When he felt that certain business drawing close and touched it, such courage, he realized what a smooth job it was. And where he imagined he would be squeezing hedgehog needles, he found a little something that was more mellow and soft than Tunisian wool, and pliable and delicate and tender. That's literally what the story says. Yep, guy reaches out to fend off a prickly imp or else a lady of the night that's, well established, but finding instead super soft skin in a particular area, flings himself across the bed and, quote, wrapped himself around it like an octopus. Sight unseen. He thinks maybe it could be a fairy, but also doesn't really care because he's only thinking with one thing. They pose and play other naughty games all night. Like, quote, Mute Sparrow, which the footnotes are sure to tell us is a dirty, dirty play on words because a sparrow cannot sing while it's, eating a worm. So recap. Prince, scared, pretends to be dead, feels some soft, fleshy, naughty bits, and can't even help it. He flings himself on top of whatever it is and goes ham without even seeing a dang thing. This goes on for 7 nights, and the prince doesn't question it, has no idea what this wonderful lady looks like. But now he's finally starting to get curious about his good luck. I mean, it's about time. Who or what is this would-be top of mind right after a myriad of safety concerns? But like all fairy tale princes, who would rather ruin their steps with tar in order to hopefully snag the shoe of the woman they are interested in rather than just asking for her name, this guy concocts some half-baked plan to see the face of his mystical mistress. One night while she is sleeping, he, drumroll please, ties her braid to his arm. Got him. And then calls a servant to bring over some candles. Genius. When he sees her, she is more beautiful than anything he could imagine. He channels his inner Myrtle and waxes poetic for paragraphs about her crimson lips, pearly teeth, how she puts Helen of Troy and Venus to shame with her radiance, how he shall never sleep again because she's a perfect living statue. Kinda creepy? Now, the love at first sight trope is very overdone, but I'm not even sure what we'd call this one. Wow, thank goodness the potentially demonic entity I was dropping anchor into for a week straight is really pretty and I love her trope? Lust is blind? Anyway, while externally monologuing this, his arms are like snakes squeezing her body and neck, so of course she wakes up and gives the cutest little yawn that just sends the prince into another round of loving words. If she was perfect sleeping, her waking eyes, quote, have pierced a hole in his heart, and, oh my precious, if I was already about to lose my sense when I saw this temple of love without candles, what will be of my life now that you've lit 2 lamps in it? On and on, you get it? She, however, does not feel worthy of his poetry, saying that she's merely fit to empty his chamber pot. Have some confidence, girl. I mean, fairy, because now it's official, she's a fairy. She's also just so humbled that she was able to be transformed from a myrtle tree into this, quote, laurel bough of a human that gets to lay with a man of, quote, such greatness and such virtue. What? She can sense this fine character from his hoeing and watering her? Must be really good. He thinks so anyway and asks her to marry him right then. And also, quote, you will be the mistress of my scepter. Oh, no, no, no. This nocturnal routine continues for days, the pair only leaving the royal bed to use the royal chamber pot. And as gross as that thought is, this tale is about to get gruesome. The prince is summoned away for 3 nights tops, but he's grown so in love with this myrtle fairy lady that his, quote, love is bordering on jealous obsession, and he's worried about leaving her alone for some reason. Because of this, he asks her to return to her myrtle pot and stay in it the whole time he's away. She, who I'm sure is enjoying her new human form and its freedom to walk around and not be stuck in a pot, has no choice but to do his will, either by spell or by her desire to do his. She requests simply that a little bell be tied to the top bough of the myrtle tree with a silk ribbon, so that when he comes home he can ring it and she can jump out and say, here I am. Yeah, it feels like a failed surprise party already, but she's really excited about it, bless her. She seems way too naive to me, but the prince humors her and also asks his servant to keep making the bed every night and to keep the myrtle watered. And don't dare take any branches because this jealous lover prince has them all counted, pal. Now, and we should have assumed this of our overly eager kinky prince, but the story decides to tell us all about the prince's women in the wings. Well, it bluntly calls them the 7, quote, women of vice, but work is work, and to them, the prince has stopped coming by to, quote, plow their fields, and they are growing concerned that a hot new thing has replaced them. And I kinda think they have the right idea. That's an income source just gone. You'd think with the prince who rotates between 7 Wonder Women there would be some job security, but they didn't count on a freaking tree supplanting them. Anyway, I've got to respect the hustle and gumption because they pulled together funds to hire a mason to dig out a tunnel from their house into the prince's bedroom to see if there is a pretty little thing stealing their business. No one saw this, and the mason was clearly well paid so as not to squeak a peep about it. But it doesn't matter because the room is empty, except for a really pretty myrtle tree, which they also fall in love with. No kidding, they rip that thing to shreds out of anger and frustration, I'm sure. I hope they're at least compensated for this genius infrastructure addition to the castle, though. If things don't work out with the Myrtle Fairy, this is a great convenience to get to the night party house. And things won't work out with the Myrtle Fairy because the women have torn the tree to pieces. The youngest madame of the bunch takes the whole top of the tree, which of course has the little bell tied to it, which rings. And the Myrtle Fairy pops out. Here I am. Read the room, Fairy. I know you're new here, but... Seeing how perfect and pretty this new competition is, the 7 past lovers, quote, lay their paws on her and say, "You're that Madame Magnificence who has taken possession of the tender flesh that belonged to us. Go on, you're on the draining board now." A draining board is the stone slab corpses were laid on to drain fluid before burial. These ladies are ruthless, and they truly are, because they throw a stick at the fairy's head, and the fairy tree lady breaks into 100 pieces. Each of the women then, quote, took her share, which means that they took turns hitting the fairy or else took chunks of her body for themselves. It's a bloody, messy mess. We're supposed to be happy and appreciate that the youngest madame, the one who just took the tip of the tree, only takes a lock of the dead lady's golden hair as a trophy for her job well done. Oh, okay, Gimli, but you still helped off the plant lady. The irony in the myrtle tree being her own funeral wreath is amazing. What's not amazing is when the servant walks in to make the bed and sees the absolute carnage. He's about as good as dead because he was not to touch a branch of that tree. But there's no tree anymore but a full-on CSI crime scene. Quote, sinking his teeth into his hand, he picked up the bits of flesh and bone that remained, and when he had scraped the blood off the floor, he piled everything back into the same pot, which he watered. He then prepared the bed, closed the door, and locked it, and then freaking leaves this town in the dust. Maybe the prince won't notice because the bed's made all nice? Or does this guy think that this kind of Bluebeardy and cleanup job is what he was actually hired for? Good freaking riddance in that case. The prince returns home, rings the bell, but no silly unsurprise party is waiting for him. In fact, nothing is, and he's too desperate to wait for his now missing servant to unlock the room that he kicks down the door. When he sees his branchless myrtle tree in the pot, he goes to a very dark place mentally and emotionally. He's distraught and doesn't want to live in a world without his myrtle. And we essentially get an "oh, happy dagger" speech from him that I won't get into because this story has enough CWs going on. What sort of soul harder than a bat's has ruined this lovely pot of mine? Without my darling, sleep will be torture, food poison, pleasure constipation, and life a bitter fruit. His eloquent words of lament are enough to, quote, move the stones in the street. And he turns sickly, or, quote, the hams of his lips turned into rancid lard. That's how you know he's so sad. And the fairy who has so conveniently begun sprouting, quote, anew from the remains placed in the pot, is so moved by her lover's tears and his despondent condition, quote, a wormy lizard, cabbage juice, jaundice, a pear, the ask of a fig pecker, and a wolf's fart, that she hurries up and grows back into her womanly form to comfort him. She explains how the old birds split her head open and then pulled an Osiris on her, which is not quite true. In that story, according to this one, the Egyptian god Osiris's brothers tricked him, shoved him in a chest with a hammer shut, pour molten lead into it, and shove it into the sea. Yes, these ladies of the night did the fairy dirty and were very wrong to do so, but I don't recall liquid metal until right now, so she's exaggerating a little bit, no? Life returns to the prince upon seeing his pretty lady, and he, quote, gave her 1,000 caresses and cuddles, smooches and squeezes. And he wants to hear the whole story from the top, presumably with no exaggeration. He discovers the servant who fled was not at all at fault and hires him again. Hasn't that servant been through enough though, Prince? Prince gets Dad's consent to marry the fairy, and they throw a huge wedding feast, with only the most important lords of the land in attendance. And the, quote, 7 hags who had butchered that suckling calf. What a wedding party. The prince waits until everyone begins eating to introduce the least appetizing wedding day feast game ever. He asks the whole room, "What punishment would you inflict on the person or persons who would maim my new bride?" Could you imagine this at a bridal shower? I mean, maybe Wednesday Addams's. If the nobles and dignitaries around the table are shocked and off-put by this game, they don't show it and instead play along by suggesting fun things like the gallows, tortured on the wheel, thrown off a cliff, etc. But of course, the good time working women know which way the wind is blowing with this question and obviously what it means for their very near futures. But they can't simply suggest a mild punishment. Oh no, they have to play along like the nobles and keep one-upping the torturous suggestion before, lest they look suspicious. Channeling Elden Ring's despicable dung-eater, they say, "Whoever had the courage even to touch that delectable morsel of love's pleasures would deserve to be buried alive in a sewer pipe." The prince, in a aha got a moment of glory, says, "You have brought suit against yourselves. All that remains for me is to carry out your order, since you are the ones who made an omelet of this pretty little head and minced up these lovely limbs like meat for the sausage." And so 6 of the 7 are thrown into the sewer for the rest of their days. But how does he prove this? The fairy is all in one piece now. There's no evidence of it apart from the fairy's account and the servant. The fairy is back and healthy and immortal, so this just sounds like a convenient way for the prince to finally, brutally cut ties with his unattached past lifestyle. But that 7th youngest madam, apparently even though she ripped off the head of the myrtle tree and participated in the dirty deed and took hair for herself, this young knight lady is pardoned by the prince, given a dowry by him, and married to that traumatized servant. What? Sounds like the prince might really just have the hots for her on the side in the future, but that's me having no faith in the prince. He was just so eager to octopus whatever the heck was in his bed that I wouldn't put anything past him. He does, however, do right by Myrtle's parents, after basically bullying the mom into giving him the tree in the first place. He gives them enough money to get by comfortably for the rest of their lives. Prince and Myrtle are happily ever after, and I have to wonder if he'll ever come to terms with her basically being immortal and him not. But that's not the point of this story. What is the point is this outdated moral. The lame goat gets by if it finds none who block it. What? Yeah, that's referring to the ladies of the night, but it's bad. The end. You may have guessed by now by the extremely colorful happenings and endearingly dirty descriptive language that this was Giambattista Basile classic, The Myrtle Tree. This tale was written to be performed live, and while the whole collection of fairy tales was for little ones, aka kids, it's kind of like how children's movies throw in naughty references that only the grown-ups will understand, multiplied by 100. There are, of course, other fairy tales that share this woman or tree theme, and this myrtle tree is not the only fairy tale where we plant the bones of the dead and they will revive under its branches. I've already covered the Brothers Grimm's Juniper Tree and another English version called the Rose Tree here. This thing also happens in a way in the Cinderella fairy tales, where the Ash Maiden's own deceased mother is laid to rest under a hazel tree. She visits so often that the tree itself, or a fairy or bird from the tree, clothe her in magic outfits to set up her destiny with the prince. Folklore trees are fascinating, but this particular fairy tale was so spicy, passionate, and brutal that I thought it needed its very own video. But what are your thoughts? Do you like spicier fairy tales? What other fairy tales and lore would you like me to cover on this channel? Let me know in the comments below. And do be sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next weird video stewing in the cauldron right now. Goodbye!